that's just what I was going to get to, because number one of those two things that you're talking about, the individuals building capital, I mean, aren't the actions of most countries today destroying the middle class, preventing them or making it extremely difficult for them to accumulate capital?
Yes, and this is one thing that concerns me a great deal, because the problem is the productive parts of society, which is basically the middle class. I mean, the so-called upper classes can take care of themselves. They can hire the lawyers to interpret the laws to their advantage, the accountants to keep their taxes down, the investment advisors to get them into good deals. They'll be fine, unless things get so bad that we eat the rich. And lower classes don't have anything anyway, so they're not an element. It's the middle classes we're talking about. And the problem is this. It's that if those people produce more than they consume and save the difference, what do they save it in? They save it in dollars or whatever the national currency is. And the problem is this, is these stupid governments all over the world with their quantitative easing measures are basically going to destroy their national currencies, which means destroy the savings of the middle class. And that's going to be a sociological earthquake, because I'm afraid that almost all the currencies of the world over the next generation are going to reach their intrinsic value, which is essentially zero. And it's going to wipe out the middle classes with it. So this could be really quite serious.
So the Greater Depression is not just the economic repercussions, but you're suggesting political and social repercussions as well.
Yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a lot more of the type of thing that we saw in London recently, or even in Vancouver recently, because when people find that they can't make ends meet and they feel that they aren't going to be able to improve themselves, they turn violent. It's just what happens with the human chimpanzee. He does this type of thing. So the sociological implications could be nasty. The political implications could be nasty too, because all these people are they think the government is a magic cornucopia. They think that the government can do this, do that, make everybody wealthy, raise everybody's wages. This is ridiculous. The government has nothing except what it steals from the society as a whole. But there are lots of politicians that will try to cater to this, and you could get people with a dictatorial bent that promise the bourgeoisie all these things. They get into office and they grab the economy in a stranglehold. So I think we're in for sociological rough times, economic rough times, financial rough times, political rough times, and maybe even military rough times.
In what sense?
Well, because certainly in the case of the United States, one of the few departments of the government that has some respect from people is the U.S. military. Now, I don't consider it anything more than a heavily armed version of the post office. But nonetheless, everybody is apatheticizing the military at this point. The U.S. spends more on military than basically the rest of the world put together. The military is like a giant gold-plated hammer. And the problem with having a hammer like that is everything starts looking like a nail. And it is. That's what there are interventions in the Middle East and 100 countries around the world where we have active troops stationed. So the problem is not only that, though, it's that when things start going bad domestically, politicians, for obvious reasons, like to say it's somebody else's fault. It's those damn Chinese that are taking away our jobs by sending us all this cheap stuff, which is increasing our standard of living. Or it's those damned Arabs that are driving up the cost of oil by not opening the spigots. I mean, these are idiotic things to say, but You know, they play well in soundbite TV.
Well, it's always easier to blame someone else rather than actually look at what the true causes of the problems are, which tend to start at home. You know, I remember a conference back in the early 1980s, and you'd said at that time that in 10 years the Soviet Union was going to collapse. And it seemed a little bit outrageous at the time, but in fact that's exactly what happened. And some of the things you're saying now, are you saying them with the same type of conviction that you did back in the early 1980s in terms of your outlook with the Soviet Union?
Well, I'm not a fortune teller, but I like to look at what I think are the facts and draw logical conclusions, even if they're not conclusions that are particularly pleasant to draw. Because like everybody else, I like good times more than I like bad times. Good times are more fun than bad times, and they tend to be a lot less dangerous. But, you know, you got to recognize that we're just part of history, and there have been wars and depressions and all kinds of terrible things that are part and parcel of history. What did Gibbon say? He said, history is little more than a catalog of the, what did he say, the disasters, misfortunes, of mankind. So history is going to continue, I'm afraid.
And Santayana said if we ignore history, we're doomed to relive it. What is we as individuals should be doing and thinking about if this scenario that you're describing plays itself out in the months and years ahead?
Well, I'm going to operate on the assumption that the U.S. is going to be the epicenter of this coming earthquake. So I don't particularly want to be in the U.S. At this point. It's too bad. And I say the U.S. because as far as I'm concerned, America, which is an idea, and it was an excellent idea, a unique idea, America is dead and gone. It's been replaced by the United States. And the U.S. is just another one of 200 nation states that cover the face of the globe like a skin disease at this point. So I think that one thing you should do to protect yourself is you've got to diversify politically, because your main danger is political. So you've got to diversify politically first.
So geographic diversification of one's assets.
I think that's critical, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, not to take a rather catastrophic example, I mean, every Jew in Germany that didn't diversify himself before was too late, lost everything. Every Russian that didn't diversify himself before the 1920s lost everything. Every Vietnamese that didn't do it before 1975 lost everything. It's constantly happening. Every Cuban that didn't do it before 1959 lost everything. There are scores of examples I can give you right now. Mm-hmm. So I think that the U.S. is next on the dance card from that point of view.